Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Dr. Doctor, the show where no topic is too hot or too cold. Whether it's politics, religion, relationships, entertainment, or everyday life, you will be hearing from the experts. This show is not for the faint of heart or the faint of mind. But if you want to be inspired, you have come to the right place. And now, prepare to be enlightened as we introduce the host of Dr. Doctor, Dr. Peter Tassi, and his close advisor, Dr. Fooch.
Welcome to Dr. Doctor and the Great Minds series. We continue with the great minds in history today, and today we look at Sigmund Freud, one of the greatest psychologists of all time. Once again today, like we have in other podcasts, we seek the truth. As mentioned in previous podcasts, especially with Nietzsche and Aristotle, the driving force in man is to discover truth. And as mentioned in my book, My 3 Promises, Your Path to Happiness, discovering that which is true must be a goal that all of us have. Not only because when truth is our foundation, it propels our own evolution, it also leads to happiness. It leads to a fulfilled and enriched society. The problem, of course, is that the pilgrimage to discovering truth is one hell of a difficult journey. Secondly, living according to that which is true is very painful. It means disrupting our comfortable life and sometimes our miserable life that we have found comfort in and changing everything. We know how painful change can be, even though we know the path to happiness involves this suffering. Sigmund Freud, like all great minds in history, sought truth. He sought what it was that made up our psychology. He embarked on a study of the human mind and its functions. And although Freud is hated by many people, he has many critics because some of the outrageous things he said and some of his theories. He's still considered the greatest psychologist of all time. Like many of you, I may disagree with a lot of what Freud said, but this does not dismiss for me much of the truth that he deduced about human behavior. And it doesn't sway my thinking in believing that he's one of the great minds in human history. Freud, like a lot of great minds in history, is a stepping stone to other great minds that brings us to that which is true. Do you ask yourself and challenge yourself by analyzing your dreams, questioning why you displace, project, rationalize your behavior? This isn't an easy thing to do. We don't want to analyze these things. We just want to go through life and not analyze anything that will bring us discomfort, that would bring us suffering, that would drive us in the direction of discovering who we truly are and why we do the things that we do. But if you want to, Freud does provide some answers in these areas. Born in 1856 in Freiburg in the Austrian Empire, he lived and worked in Vienna, left Austria in 1938, went to Great Britain, where he died at the age of 83 in 1939. He left the Vienna because of the Nazi movement and how he disagreed with that. Freud created psychoanalysis, and many credit him with being the father of psychology. But he created psychoanalysis to get to the bottom of our anxieties, our conflicts, our neurosis, and our unhappiness. He himself was often unhappy, a very crude person, blunt, unpleasant, and miserable even with his friends. Freud became famous like a celebrity not because of one single discovery, but because of the body of his work and its immensity. So let's try to provide today a brief but comprehensive synopsis of what Freud had to say. We start with Freud's theory that we have three parts to ourselves, and all of you, I think, are familiar with this. You've heard it many times. The three parts: the id, the ego, and the superego. The id is the part of us which drives us by the pleasure principle. Eating, sex, drinking, drugs, anything that provides us with pleasure is the id, driving us to do these things. It's unconscious, and it doesn't function on reason, and it doesn't push us to do things that are good for us, but it pushes us to do things that bring us pleasure. This is the id. Then there is the superego, also the unconscious part of the mind, but created by society, by church, by parents. It's that which is stated by these groups of people as to what is moral and the kind of life we should be living. Right or wrong? We all have our opinions about the rules and morality set by church, state, and parents and communities. But this, ingrained in us from childhood, is our superego, pulling us in the opposite direction of id. So you have id and superego always in conflict with each other, to do that which is pleasurable, the id, to do that which is righteous or moral, the superego. And in between is the ego. The ego is negotiating between these two, the superego and the id, and making decisions about what we will do, the life we will live. It tries to work out how to satisfy the id and at the same time suppress desires. This is the emergence of the consciousness. So id and superego, unconscious factors working on us, and the ego, the conscious. And we're always trying to adjust to what Freud called the reality principle. The pleasure principle, the id, is what drives us, wanting physical and emotional rewards and moving away from unpleasant things like discipline or any form of drudgery. But if we do not regulate this drive, this is the reality principle sets in, it will drive us towards doing dangerous things like not working, sleeping with members of our own family, societal chaos, living the pleasure principle. That would lead to total chaos and disruption. So we have to constantly regulate. The ego has to constantly regulate between the id and the superego. What we want to do is work at discovering truth. Why do we do the things we do, Freud asks. When we can figure out the source of our conflicts and our neurosis, we can adjust and get rid of those conflicts within and those neuroses. The question is, how do we do that? And Freud offers what he invented, psychoanalysis. Going back into our early years of development, into our psychosexual development, and discovering what went wrong that caused these conflicts and this neurosis. What caused the healthy balance not to occur between the conflict of the id and the superego. One method that he used by looking at the unconscious motivation and the unconscious dynamics or conflicts of the person. We see these conflicts in our dreams. Freud studied dreams in this psychoanalysis process, where he looked at his clients' dreams, which he viewed as wish fulfillments. He looked at paraplexuses, slips of the tongue. You've heard that, the Freudian slips, things that we say that we're really thinking subconsciously, and we accidentally slip them out. Through our jokes, we tell jokes to relieve anxieties that we have deep inside, and the kind of jokes that we say will reveal a lot. Through forms of the mental illnesses that we end up developing will tell us something about what went wrong in our childhood, in all different ways. And Freud used the form of psychoanalysis to get at this. You know yourself with dreams. When you have dreams, the temptation is to examine them. I know myself, I'll examine my dreams. Sometimes I have dreams that are pretty wild. I don't dare share them with you. But I discover a lot about myself through my dreams. And I get a peek through the window of my childhood. And I could see it because I remember things in my childhood and my own upbringing that would lead to exactly the kinds of dreams that I have. So you should try it. Examine your dreams. The first step here is to admit that we're not aware of all the reasons why we do things. When we do things in life, we think we know the reasons, we fully understand. But the first step is saying, I don't know all the reasons. So with great humility, you can say, you know what? I'm going to psychoanalyze myself. And so that I can not only understand the conflicts that I live with inside of me, but I can understand the way I behave. And the great courage to face this truth. So courage and humility, back to the virtues, which we've talked about so much on the podcast. So an example may be why we married the person we married. We may say it's because they are friendly, they're intelligent, they're attractive, we're in love with them. Yes, this is all true, Freud would say. These are true. But Freud is saying there may be other motives involved that we are not aware of. And we can never discover what those motives are to understand the total nature of our marriage and the reason why we married. Unless we are humble enough to admit that we don't know all those things. And we have to be willing to look back into our past to fully understand all the reasons why, in this example, the many examples, why we got married to this particular person. So Freud is saying that, he creates psychoanalysis so that he can discover the source of our conflicts, as I mentioned, our unhappiness and our neurosis. And in order to do that, we have to look at our childhood. And I think that most psychologists agree that, for decades and decades, psychologists agreed that our personality was shaped by the age of 7. Some said 5. Some said 10 or 12. But we become who we are in terms of our personality and our behavior in our early years. So this is where we have to go back and we have to look at what went wrong to understand the kind of conflicts or unhappiness we have today and the problems we're experiencing. So Freud says we go through 5 stages in life. And if there's a problem at any of these stages, it will cause difficulty for us as adults, including neurosis. Stage 1, and I'm sure you've heard of these, in addition to the id, ego, and superego that's always working out issues between the pleasure principle and what society says is moral. You've heard that we've just covered that. You've heard of many of these 5 stages that Freud introduced to the world. Stage 1, which happens from birth to 1 year old, is the oral stage. It's the pleasure stage. Babies are sucking, chewing, breastfeeding, anything to please the oral desires. Problems here in this stage that are caused by unhealthy upbringing or direction or any kind of interruption in this oral stage can lead to, as adults, things like eating too much, smoking, drinking, and also, Freud says, a manipulative personality. Stage 2, from 1 year old to 3 year old, is the anal stage, and I'm sure you've heard of that too. This is the stage of toilet training. If things go wrong, it can lead to a person becoming compulsive, a clean freak, stingy, and be what we often hear people say, you're anal retentive, or you're anal. There is always this battle between, in this stage, going to the toilet when you're told to go, the superego, and soiling yourself, pleasing yourself by just going, soiling yourself, the id. And we may develop difficulty as adults in controlling our own impulses as we get older if this stage goes wrong. So we see here another stage of development where if things go wrong, it will affect us as adults and cause the things we're talking about in terms of anxieties, unhappiness, and neurosis. So that's oral and anal. And through it all, the id and the ego and the superego are working things out. Stage 3 is the phallic stage. This is from 3 years old to 6 years old, and you've heard of this, the phallic stage. This is where boys start to become aware of their penis and they seek satisfaction. And they seek it from their mother, but their father is in the way. So feelings start to enter the mind of the child that they want to kill the father, get the father out of the way, the Oedipus complex, which you've heard of. But they believe that their father will castrate them if they get too close to their mother. So this sex drive that the boy has is suppressed until puberty. But if the boy gets stuck in this stage, they can become, as an adult, jealous or aggressive. Girls in this stage, 3 to 6 years old, develop penis envy, believing their penis has been taken from them. So as adults, if this stage is experiencing difficulties, they will, as adults, either desire to dominate, or submit to men. Complicated stuff. It's a complicated phase that is affected by our experiencing of loving one parent and hating the other. We're affected in this stage by how our parents interact with us, and we learn we can't have sex with the one we love. This affects us in adulthood sometimes because we end up getting married, we have children, and then the sex is over. And Freud would argue some of this could be because as children we've learned that the one we desire sex with is not the one we can have sex with. So it's certainly interesting. The next stage, stage 4, is latency. This happens from the age of 6 to puberty, and this is kind of a more of a dormant stage. It is a time when we develop friends, hobbies, and Freud doesn't talk too much here about the conflicts that can arise in this stage. And stage 5 is the genital stage, from puberty to death. This stage is marked with independence from parents, psychological detachment, and a time, especially in adulthood, when we try to resolve those things caused by earlier stages, the difficulties. So we have here two things that we've discussed so far: the id, ego, and superego, always working for that balance. The id and the superego kind of in war with each other. The ego, the conscious part of ourselves, trying to work out what we should actually do. And through all of this, we have the 5 stages of development that Freud talked about. So now what I'd like to do is I'd like to conclude with what Freud says is our defense mechanisms to deal with unresolved conflicts. We have defense mechanisms. Some of us will resort to sublimation. This is where we turn our sexual energy into something else, like art, some creative outlet. I've heard guys say, and I'm probably guilty of the same, saying, geez, I wish I didn't have a sexual drive. I wouldn't be plagued every day with these thoughts and these temptations and things that men deal with. I'm sure women do too, to some extent, but man's uncontrollable, insatiable appetite for the physical pleasure that comes with sex. And I say to them that the problem with that is if you get rid of that sexual drive and that sexual energy, you'll get rid of a lot of other things as well that you usually channel that energy and drive into, whether it's art, some form of art, creativity, or hard work, or whatever. The second thing that Freud says that we do to deal with these conflicts, but not dealing with them necessarily in a healthy way, but to deal with these conflicts or unresolved issue, is displacement. So an example here is you may hate your father because he beats you and is abusive, but you displace those feelings and you kick the dog. So shameful thoughts that you have are replaced with other thoughts and actions. A third form of dealing with this as a defense mechanism, these problems, is projection. I have impulses, so I am ashamed of these impulses, and I project them to someone else. I feel lust for something, and then what I do is blame others. So someone who is homophobic, for example, who's always criticizing someone for men for looking at them or being attracted to them, and name-calling them could be an unresolved issue that they, in fact, are gay. So what they do is they project this feeling on other people, where they're the one that's actually attracted to men. The fourth is rationalization. You think something bad, and then you give it a rational explanation. An example here would be like a parent who hits a child, is always hitting the child, and they actually, because they've got serious problems and unresolved conflicts, they enjoy hitting the child, but they'll say, I do it for the child's own sake. That's a pretty severe example, but I'm sure you see that all the time. People rationalizing what they do. And the rationalization is completely false. It's nothing but a lie. But it may sound good, and people fall for it. Or the fifth, regression. And you sometimes see this in people where People run into a particular situation and they can't deal with it, and they actually regress back to their childhood, and you could see that childlike behavior come out in them. And the sixth is repression, where we repress thoughts and conflicts and bury them. But I think this only lasts so long before these repressed feelings, unresolved issues, these conflicts from those stages in childhood that Freud talked about, these repressed feelings, eventually the top blows off the bottle and out comes all of these unresolved issues and all these things that happened in childhood. So we do all these things, these six methods, sublimation, displacement, projection, rationalization, regression, and repression, to keep a balance. But it doesn't always work. We end up sometimes becoming hysterical to the point where we actually can't see or hear. We become blind and deaf, even though there's nothing physically wrong with us. We experience panic attacks, paralysis, amnesia, forgetting things that happened, etc., these kinds of things. And these are symptoms that we have that will keep the truth repressed into the unconscious. So we do all these six things as defense mechanisms, and we don't deal with the problem, and it can manifest itself in all kinds of ways as an adult that are unhealthy, but we continue to keep it in our unconscious. Freud tried to get these things out of us, the conflicts that happened in the stages of life, the conflicts that exist that we're covering up through these methods, sublimation, displacement, projection, rationalization, regression, repression, through hypnosis. But that didn't really work. So he moved to what he called free association and the development of psychoanalysis. All your problems in life are symptoms of something deeper. You're hiding something from yourself, and once you discover what that is that you're hiding and burying and covering up through all these defense mechanisms, the problem will go away. You have to embark on this journey of truth to discover what is true and what it is that you're hiding from. And it's not until you do that you will heal yourself and become healthy. And of course, this is Freud's theories, and I agree to it in the extent that I think that until you can do these things in your own personal life, you cannot be really, truly happy. You'll always be enslaved by other things as long as you're not willing to dig deep within to discover that which is true, and to look outside yourself and embrace all the revelations that life give you that reveal truth. Until you're willing to go through that and the suffering involved in that, truth is unattainable. And according to Freud, unhappiness will be your destiny, and happiness is unattainable. So thank you for joining us today with Sigmund Freud, the Great Mind series, and we look forward to having you again for the next Great Mind we'll discuss, and wishing you a great day and a great week.